understanding of these kinds of hauntings, and I'm going to try and say why. But also going to look at psychoanalysis itself as a kind of cultural and historical object, and to ask what haunts its presence. Today, I will talk a bit about ghosts, the evil eye, telepathy, the things one always talks about in the 21st century, particularly the evil eye, which I'll tell you about later. And tomorrow, there's the idea about melancholia, which I'm not sure I don't think Slavoj talked about it last week, but he's written very interestingly himself about this relationship between loss and lack, and his critique of melancholia. I want to spend a little bit of time on that. But on Friday, I'm going to give a slightly more historical thing about what happened in the international psychoanalytic movement in subsequent to its collaborations, I think one would have to say, with the Nazis during the period of the Third Reich. I'm going to focus particularly on some events at the the Hamburg Congress of Psychoanalysis in 1985 and the Berlin Congress of Psychoanalysis in 2007, because I'm interested in the way in which what you might call the spectral associations of Jewishness in psychoanalysis, of anti-Semitism, and of the kind of killing of the father that one can perceive happening at those times, continue to be reenacted, and I think there's very, very good evidence from as recent as 2007 that some unspoken elements of the history of psychoanalysis materialize in the way in which psychoanalysts themselves relate to one another and to the world. So that's a bit about the kind of structure of a certain sort of institutional unconscious that has its own intellectual as well as very particular, I think, historical domain. So that's the trajectory of these three talks, and I hope you'll find them fun, and I will do a bits of reading and bits of talking, and I will I guess what I should probably do is send Julia the slides as well. I can't seem to turn the lights off. I've been here, despite there being a nice button on here which says lights and off. So I hope it works. I slightly suspect that the lights are on those movement indicators. So if you sit really still, or if you go to sleep and don't move in your sleep, you might find that it gets nice and dark and you can see. And I don't want to put the blinds down unless we have to, because if you turn the blinds down, any air goes, because the windows are blocked and the air conditioning turns off. So this is again part of 21st century technology. Okay. What I want to say as a way of preamble is what I've got up here on the slide. That this is about the specific origins of psychoanalysis. Of course, there's lots of ways of talking about the origins of psychoanalysis. It's deeply over-determined, and it has many sources in various elements of the European emancipation, of course, of scientific thought in the 19th century. In this country, interestingly and relevantly, that is, when I say this country, I mean Britain, the origins of psychoanalysis are rather different from those in Europe, where it was clearly a part of the Jewish emancipatory experience. In this country, the origins of psychoanalysis were primarily with the Society for Psychical Research. And it's very interesting now, and then there's a kind of, you can draw a line really from there through the Bloomsbury group, what's called Vernal, who chaired the Society for Psychical Research in Cambridge in the late 19th century, the 1890s and early years of the 20th century, was one of the people who taught various members of the Bloomsbury group, and indeed was the uncle of one of them. And so you can see there's a kind of line, it's interesting, and then the Bloomsbury group, Virginia Woolf, and of course Leonard Woolf, they were the publishers of Freud in English. It's very interesting to trace that trajectory. And Freud himself was a corresponding member of the Society for Psychical Research here, and his paper, The Unconscious, published in 1915, if I remember rightly, was published in the Annals of the Society for Psychical Research. So the kind of origin of psychoanalysis, not just in Jewishness, but also in the occult, or something to do with it, what we would now think of the occult anyway, are pretty clear and well-founded. And of course there was a great deal of interest in Freud at that time, because around questions of hypnosis, suggestion, the sorts of things that I'm going to talk about a bit today. So this sort of contemporary interest in psychoanalysis, telepathy, trauma, ghostliness, spectrality, is I think a genuine historical reference too. I don't think it's just a sort of rather peculiar post-structural reading of psychoanalysis by people who want to make their careers by saying something